Welcome back, everyone. We have some good news for you here today, which has been a recent theme, which is a good thing for all Americans for sure. So this story that we're going to talk about here today actually was published mid last week. However, it got sort of swept under the rug, if you will, because of all the suppressors and the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act videos that we were putting up there, as well as everyone else who's in this space, who's doing the right thing anyway, was putting up. So this kind of got swept aside, but I think it's really, really important. And then as of late Friday night, like at the end of business, they also made two really important, when I say they, I mean the Department of Justice. They also made two really big announcements as well. So let's talk about those before we talk about the main topic of today's video. So what they did, the Department of Justice, I believe in the Fifth Circuit, in the case of a suppressor case, essentially a guy was arrested for having a suppressor that he didn't have a tax stamp for. It's being appealed, like I said, I believe at the Fifth Circuit right now. And for the first time since I've been alive, the Department of Justice and the federal government stated in a court case that suppressors have the legal protections of firearms. Since I've been alive, that has never happened. So that is huge news, because what that means is the federal government is acknowledging for the first time that Second Amendment privileges, i.e. shall not be infringed, apply to suppressors. So that is a huge, huge deal. Again, there have been multiple cases over the last at least 20 years, but again, over the last 60 years, they've been going on where essentially different rights organizations as well as appellate courts have argued this, and every single time the federal government's position has always been they're not protected. So they have said that they are. That is a big deal. Obviously, we're hoping that the Hearing Protection Act goes through in the quote-unquote big, beautiful bill, and that becomes sort of a moot issue for most people. But even in some states, even if that happened, that will still be a big deal in litigation that goes on very likely after that passes. So great news there. Additionally, the Department of Justice, I should mention before, everything I'm talking about in today's video is going to be coming out of or the result of President Trump's executive order on the Second Amendment. He directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to create a Second Amendment task force. She did. And all of these things that I'm going to talk about today came out of that, including the suppressor position that I just talked about. Additionally, they also looked at different states and how they apply to NICS background checks in terms of concealed carry permits. So, for example, in North Carolina, where I've done 1 million transfers over the course of running this channel over the many years, I have a concealed carry permit. So because of that, when I go into an FFL to transfer a firearm, there's no NICS check that happens, right? It's just an instant check because the North Carolina permit, the concealed carry permit, satisfies the background check mandate that the federal law imposes on all dealers. So that was true in some states, but not in other states. For example, in Florida, that's not the case. They still have to do a background check, and you have to wait and all that nonsense. So they added 2 states to it, and I expect very likely a lot more states are going to be added to this. But right now, they added Michigan as well as Alabama, 2 states in the country where that happens. So if you live in Michigan or if you live in Alabama, the next time you walk into a local gun shop to buy a firearm, if you have a concealed carry permit from your state, there will be no background check. You're just going to fill out your 4473 and you're going to walk right on out of that shop. So great news there. Again, those things were announced like late, like 4:45 p.m. on Friday. So those are things that didn't really make a lot of news. But there's a lot of news going on lately in the Second Amendment space. It is a hot one out here today. If I'm filming, if I'm sweating, that is why, guys. I'm not nervous about the video. All right, so cool. So the ATF published this, I believe it was Wednesday, on their website, and you guys should be seeing the screenshots here as I'm talking. But it published 10 different things that they have done under the Trump administration in terms of policy changes and or procedure changes. And they also published 8 things that are still yet to come that they plan on doing. There's one that they didn't publish in there that they definitely should. I will talk about that at the end. So it says, under new leadership, ATF has already taken significant steps, including ending the enhanced regulatory enforcement policy that targeted firearms dealers. So if many of you guys know, there's a couple bullet points on this that kind of relate to that. President Biden issued a zero tolerance policy, both for people who actually had FFLs, who made a mistake. Like I live at 123 Maple Court, and on the 4473, the employee doing the background check or the customer, can be either one, depending on, every gun shop does it different, wrote in there, I live on 1234 Maple Drive. So just a simple infraction like that under President Biden's policy could get that person's FFL revoked, and in some cases actually criminal charges as well. So little clerical errors like that were causing FFL dealer revocation to go to an all-time high under President Biden. That has been changed. Additionally, many of you guys know, they also had a policy of engaged in the business. And what that means, we don't really know what it means, honestly, to be clear, but what they said it was, is that if you are selling firearms for a profit and a number of other little boxes that had to be ticked in this case, then you are required to be a federal firearms licensee and have an FFL. And if you are not, then we will show up at your door at 6 a.m. and shoot you in the head. For people who think I'm being hyperbolic, that actually happened. One of the directors of the Little Rock Airport, many of you guys know, Brian, was that exact same thing happened to him. They said that he sold too many guns without having an FFL. They kicked his door in and shot him in the head at 6 a.m. So that was the Biden administration's policy on people who sell too many private firearm transactions or conduct too many private firearms transactions. They have changed that here under the Trump administration. So additionally, publishing a new administrative action policy that emphasizes firearm traceability and public safety and de-emphasizes immaterial paperwork errors. Goes to the point I was just making earlier. Encouraging any federal firearms licensees that had their licenses revoked or surrendered under the enhanced regulatory enforcement to reapply. Those applications will be judged under the new administrative policy. So what they're saying there is if you are one of those FFLs that had your license revoked and it was for one of those things I just talked about, minor clerical errors or something like that, then they're encouraging you to reapply, and the new standards will be applied to your case, and they will not ding you for those types of infractions. Removing revoked FFL inspection reports from ATF's public website. That's actually interesting. I'm not really sure why they did that. I'm not really sure what that one's all about. Instituting a NICS alert policy that restricts the use of NICS alerts to federal firearms trafficking violations. Again, that's a minor one. That's how it should have always been. I don't know why it had changed before that, but that is the primary purpose of NICS. Establishing a senior industry partner advisor liaison within the office of the director to address industry concerns and foster productive engagement. So there's another point on that that's going to be related to that. But what that really is for is going to be new technology that's coming out. So a lot of people, many of you guys know who watch my channel, will write letters to the ATF asking opinions. Again, we will talk about this in another point. And essentially this person is going to be like the head advisor, if you will, for that role. There's always new technologies in firearms and how they will be quote unquote interpreted or regulated by the ATF, although of course they should not be able to do that under the EPA case. Apparently we're still just rolling with that model, but under that model they're going to do it differently. At least that is the hope here in that one. So establishing classifications board and requiring all new firearm classifications to be reviewed and approved by the office of the director, like I was just talking about, prior to publication. So again, it's going into these ATF letters that we have all seen. Like for example, there's a really famous one, I've made many videos on it, and it says that if you have a vertical foregrip on your firearm, then it is automatically a NFA item. However, they specified in the letter that it had to be 90 degree. They were very specific about it. So if you had like an angled vertical foregrip, to this day, I can't tell you if that makes it an NFA firearm. No one really knows. Or if you had like a BCM that's like a 20 degree offset angle, is that now an NFA firearm? Again, literally no one knows. Like the people who do this for a living have no idea. No one knows. It's just whatever that person says at the time, apparently is the line between being legal and 10 years in prison under that law. So that is what they're getting at there. And then to that point, ensuring that all rules fairly implement congressional statutes rather than create entirely new laws by administrative order. Again, that one's pretty self-explanatory and we kind of already hit on it. Improving response time from the Firearms Ammunition Technology Division, FAT-D, to FFL inquiries. So those come in a number of different forms for FFL inquiries. Like a lot of times it'll be like a really weird thing that'll happen, just one that's not weird, but it'll give you an example, is that somebody's suppressor blows up, right? And they're like, well, what do we do with those forms that are on our logbooks as FFLs, and in this case, SOT, a special occupational tax holder who can transfer suppressors. Hopefully that's gone soon, but as of right now, that's what happens. So that's something that happens fairly commonly. And over the years, there have been a number of different responses to that question. I know when I first started getting into this game, They used to say to take a picture and send a letter to the ATF with the serial number and all of those sorts of things. Now, I've heard people have been told to just log it in their book. Again, I don't know what the right answer to that is. So having that person who is the head person, the advisor or the liaison within the office, working with that division, in theory, should give us a person to contact who actually is the end-all be-all person to give you the right answer, because those answers seem to change depending on whoever writes the letter from that division. Reversing a ban on the implementation of non-lethal training ammunition. So that one's kind of complex. I actually made a full video about it. If you guys are interested, you can go check out all the details of it. But that very likely was an attempt by the Biden administration to make it harder to train with simunitions for civilians. So for folks who don't know, simunitions are a very good training aid. They are essentially paintballs, but they fire at a pretty fast rate, and they fire out of normal firearms. So the firearms that you're going to use in a self-defense situation, you can convert them to use these types of munitions in many cases. And the benefit of them is simunitions, in my opinion, are the best force-on-force trainer because the pain is real. So if you're using blanks, for example, many of you guys will know this, if you're using, who have been in the military, if you're using blanks and you're doing like building clearing, like everyone is Rambo and runs up the stairs, and they're all heroes in that case. However, if there's a staircase and somebody is at the top of it with simunitions, nobody goes up that staircase. It's the same thing as if it was real bullets. So it is the most accurate training aid because the pain is real, and pain makes people reconsider things. And under President Biden, he tried to make that technology harder, if not impossible, to get for civilians to train with. Obviously, that is the antithesis of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is for citizens to train. That's the whole point, and be proficient. And then they go on with the things that are in progress and should be coming. They say they'll publish an updated commerce report. That's really not a big one for us out there. Updating the ATF Form 20, which is the authorization to transport firearms, into a simplified notice-based system. And so they're going to talk about that, I think, again. So that form is for a number of different things, but if you are traveling with certain types of restricted firearms, so SBRs, for example, across state lines, right now, as it has been historically, you have to get approval before you actually travel. And that form typically takes about 30 days. That's been the historic average. And what they're saying here now is instead of that, it'll just be notice. So you're like, hey, I'm going to cross state lines, like I'm moving from I was going to say Connecticut to Massachusetts, but that's a really bad example. I'm moving from Virginia to West Virginia. Right? So in order to transport those firearms legally, before this, you would have had to get a letter back from the ATF saying it's actually signed and it says you are authorized to do whatever. And so what they're saying here is you just make it a notice form where you have notified them that movement is happening, and that will satisfy their requirement, which I think is very good. Updating and simplifying ATF Form 4473 to make it more concise and user-friendly for both purchasers and FFLs. Yeah, there's a lot of confusing questions on the 4473 for sure. And one thing I hope they do in this, and this is something I made a video on it when it happened. The 4473, your name, your personal information, and the information of the firearm used to be on separate forms. So you would have had to flip it and photocopy one side and photocopy the back side to get both pieces of information. However, under President Biden, they changed that. They changed it where your name, your information, your address, all that stuff, as well as the serial number of the firearm is on the same side. Why would they do that? There's only one reason why they would do that. They would do that to make it easier to create a searchable database of firearms in America. There is quite literally no other reason to do that. They did that under the Biden administration. Hopefully, President Trump, under this administration and this executive order and this group that is to look at firearms, hopefully they reverse that, make those separate, make it harder to do that. And then I would love to see them just take that firearms registry and drag it out in front of the ATF and set it on fire. But we can all dream. But regardless, making it harder is a good thing. Do that. Reverse it back to the way it was. Publishing an open letter on changes to the Brady chart. That's exactly what it says. Ensuring uniformity in dealer inspections and enforcement across regions. So that's another thing, right? So one really good example of that is they're called IOIs, which are the inspectors that they're not actually ATF agents. They work for the ATF, but they're the ones who show up at your local FFL and do your inspections. So some of them will say, for example, that on your birth date, on the little section where it says when you were born, the actual buyer, some of them will say you actually have to spell it out. So like March, M-A-R-C-H. Some will say M-A-R is fine. And that's just the little things that, again, in some places, like in one state or region within the ATF, it's always this way, but in the other one, you cross one line and it's totally different, and people get dinged for that. Like, people have lost their licenses for those sorts of things. So again, uniformity would be very good for sure. Publishing an open letter reversing a ban on importation of dual-use barrels. That almost never happens, but hey, I'm glad they're changing it. Publishing a rule to allow electronic signatures on NFA forms. So that one's huge. The e-file system is very convenient for NFA items. Obviously, I believe it shouldn't exist at all. However, while restrictions on NFA items exist, having the e-file system actually is something that's very convenient to use for the end user, and having to, well, I don't want to say removing the signature verification, because that's not true. What they're going to do is make it so that in the e-forms, I'm assuming anyway, software that you are using to interface, you will be able to electronically sign it. That's huge. I like that. It will save everyone time. I am a fan. Reviewing all current regulations to identify and eliminate outdated or unnecessary rules. So, as I intimated in the beginning of the video, the easiest one on that, the most glaring one right now, is the frame and receiver rule. Again, that was heard by the Supreme Court. They made a horrible decision on that. However, remember, it is a rule. It is not a law. So just like President Biden instituted the frame and receiver rule, President Trump, Attorney General Bondi can rescind that rule as well. It is such a slippery slope type of issue. Quite literally, if you had a pipe in a 2x4 and that pipe happened to be close to either a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge circumference, you 100% could be charged with illegal possession of a firearm underneath that Supreme Court ruling. That is a horrible ruling. Horrible. And the frame and receiver rule needs to go away, and it needs to go away very quickly. In my opinion, that would be a great piece of news for everyone in America in terms of having some of their Second Amendment rights restored. But all of these things are very good, guys. The suppressor ruling, finally acknowledging that it is protected by the Second Amendment, huge. More and more states having the ability to bypass the NICS background check with a concealed carry permit, huge. And then all the things that we just talked about there. It's all very good news, at least in this portion that we talked about in this video. I'm glad to see it. A lot of us were very skeptical about this administration and their Second Amendment pledges, especially initially. They seem to be coming slowly, but better late than never, and there's a long way to go, and I hope more and more changes happen. I hope the HPA passes through in the big, beautiful piece of legislation, big, beautiful bill, if you will. And I hope folks are calling and blowing up the senators that they need to, all their senators, and letting them know that we want the SHORT Act in there as well to remove short barrel rifles and short barrel shotguns from the NFA. That absolutely needs to happen. We need to get active. We need to make it happen. The reason the HPA is in that bill as it left the House 100% is because of all of you guys calling, tagging people on Twitter, all of those things. It makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. So I suppose with that, I've probably ranted long enough. We'll close the video out there. If you guys aren't following me on social media, that's definitely the best place to get the most breaking updates. The two things that we talked about with the suppressors and the state stuff, I broke that on Twitter this past Friday, Twitter and Truth Social, I believe. So follow me there. Definitely they are the two places that I am least censored, but any place you can follow me, I appreciate it. Additionally, if you're subscribed, thank you. If you are subscribed, make sure you hit that notification bell. And if you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It is actually free. And according to my analytics, about 50% of you guys who watch my videos are not subscribed. So go ahead and hit that. That would be great. But if you've done that and you're still not seeing 2 to 4 videos a week here on the channel, easy explanation for that is that you are being censored by an algorithm. Way to get around that, whether you're watching here on YouTube or Rumble, is to sign up for the email list at the website here on your screen. This will get you put on 2 different lists. It'll get you put on lists. Trust me, if you're watching this video, you're already on a lot of lists. But it'll get my list that I don't share with anyone. You have my word on that. But it'll get you put on the Daily Deals email list, which goes out every day, as the name indicates, and it has typically 8 to 10 of the best deals that we find around the internet. If an item, whatever it is, guns, gear, optics, suppressors, if it is in the email on a given day, it's the cheapest I know of anywhere on the internet for that item. So that way, hopefully it saves you guys some money and also saves you some time, because I've already done the product comparisons for you. It'll also get you put on our monthly email that goes out once a month. It has all the videos since the previous month's email went out. So that way there's no algorithm censoring your eyes from my content. What a concept. And lastly, we have an SMS list that you guys can sign up for at the website here on your screen. It's at most once a day, and it's either one of two things. Normally it's either a smoking deal that I know is going to sell out really quickly, so I send it right over and it goes right on your cell phone. It doesn't have to go through your email and all the filters and all of those sorts of things. Or it is a new video that just dropped, once again bypassing the algorithm and letting you guys actually see the content you want to see. And with that, that's all I got for you. Question for you: what did I miss? What other things can this administration fix without Congress, right? That's kind of key. There's a lot of things that can be fixed, but a lot of it requires Congress. So what else can they do? Definitely let us know down below in the comments. And I thank you all for watching, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.